The following video was sponsored by the Greek American Heritage Society of Philadelphia, preserving and promoting our community's history.
We'd like to start out about your family's roots. What can you tell us? Where were they from in Greece? Why did they come to the United States, and so forth?
Well, the roots of my family are a little convoluted. The roots are really in Korone, Greece. But my father told me a story that one of his either grandfather, one of his ancestors, let's put it that way, took the family from there to the Dardanelles in Turkey, to a small village right on the Dardanelles, because of some conditions. My cousin tells me that there in those days feuds were common, and there was a feud between one of my ancestors and someone else, name unknown, and so my father took the family and moved to where he went in the Dardanelles. My father told me that one of my ancestors had an argument with a Turk, and it resulted in a homicide, and he had to flee. So he took his family and fled. Which version is true? No way to know.
Right.
My cousin said he went to Korone and he tried to find some records, but nothing exists. Anyway, my father was born there, and as was my mother later. And they came during the 1922, 21, 23, when the Great Diogmo took place. My father left and came to the United States, and then some years later returned, married my mother, and moved to Greece. I had two siblings born there, both of whom predeceased me. They died as infants there. And then my father brought my mother to New York, and that's where the other four children, myself included, were born. So that's basically up until day one.
Wow. So what did they do for work in New York?
My father initially worked for an uncle who was in the shoe shine business, but they prepared, they not only shined shoes, but they also did shoe work. And one of my cousins, the one that went to Korone to try to find out something about the family roots, had a shoe manufacturing store. I don't call it a business, I don't know how large it was, but they made handmade shoes. So that was the family trade.
Nice. At
that time. And then later, of course, the restaurant business, which was so common among Greek immigrants.
So they had a restaurant in New York?
Not in New York, no. He worked, I think he worked in his uncle's shoe business until he returned to Greece and married, and then returned to the United States.
Okay. Can you talk about your early years, where you actually grew up? Maybe what were your interests, your childhood friends?
Well, I was born in New York, as were all my brothers and my brother and two sisters. But we left when I was maybe 5 or 6 or 7 years old, somewhere in that time frame, and moved to South Jersey. So I grew up really in Vineland, New Jersey, which is south central New Jersey, about 35 miles from Atlantic City.
Sure. Did you play any sports?
I had a one-day football career.
That's more than most people.
Well, I went out on the field without a helmet. I caught a pass in the head. I took my helmet, walked back in, and that was the end of my career.
Well, you gave it a good try, right? How about childhood friends? You still keep in touch with any of your friends from Vineland or from those days?
I don't know if there are any left. No, I haven't had any contact with any of those childhood friends for many, many years. I think most of them are gone now, you know.
Did you attended high school in Vineland?
I attended local school and high school in Vineland until I graduated I guess it was 1954. And I had enlisted in the National Guard then. I went to college, and I got a student deferment while I was in college in Camden. I went to Rutgers University in Camden. They had a Camden campus. And then later, after I graduated college, I started law school a year later at Temple University Law School, and then married and settled in the Upper Darby, Philadelphia area.
Right. How did you become interested in law and pursue that as a career?
You know, that's interesting because I've explored that in my memory, and I cannot remember a time when I did not want to be a lawyer. I saw the way my father used to work in the restaurant business. He was a cook, as were so many, and I didn't want to work like that.
Sure.
So I decided I would do an office type of life, and I did.
And you made it.
And I made it.
Did you have a mentor while you were starting out in law?
Yeah, I did. Actually, my mentor really was Judge Lagakos. After I graduated law school, I began to clerk for him. He was a judge at that time. I began to clerk for him, and I worked for him for a couple of years. And he really showed me the ropes of community service and how to conduct it.
Sure.
And I just never looked back after that, you know. I was involved in everything. Sometimes it was hard to make a living, you know. You were spread so thin, you know.
Understandably, sure. What were the steps you had to take, and how did it come about to become a judge?
Mostly community service and civic service. I was involved politically also. When I had just graduated law school and had gotten active at St. Demetrius Church, which was the Upper Darby Church that was founded by my father-in-law and others. I had been active there, and I guess somebody took notice, and they asked me if I was interested in running for committee man in Upper Darby, where we lived. And I was. So I got involved in that. I was elected and served for some years as a committee man, and then moved on to solicitor of the Zoning Hearing Board in Upper Darby. And I was on that board for about 10 years before I got on the bench. And then I was involved politically too as committee man. It's a political position. And it was a lot of fun and educational too. I learned a lot of things about how the political system works. And from there, you know, a lot of times you don't elect to do something. It's that people tell you, well, you have to do this or you have to do that. And in that case, the political establishment wanted me to run for a council seat in Upper Darby with the new council government. But before that, I had been on a committee to revamp to adopt a home rule charter. And then following that, I ran for election and was elected to the board, the Upper Darby council, actually. And I served on that for a number of years until I was moved to media, where I became an assistant solicitor, county solicitor, representing the Child Welfare Agency and some other agencies, but basically the Child Welfare Agency. That was pretty much it until I was appointed until I ran and was elected to the bench.
So you were an elected judge?
Yes. All judges are elected initially in Pennsylvania, as in many other states.
And the court that you served on, what was the cases you would hear?
The court I served on is what's known as a general jurisdiction trial court, which means that the judges that serve on the bench there do everything. And so we did both civil work, criminal work. We took certain appeals from the lower court, which is now called the small claims court. And that's where I was for the next 21 years.
So when you went to work every day, where did you go? Where was this court located?
It was in Media,
Okay.
Delaware County, Pennsylvania.
The courthouse.
Yeah, it
In
was at the
Media.
courthouse.
And your tenure ran around 20 years as a judge?
I was on the bench for 21 years before I retired, but 5 of those years were as a senior judge. A retirement is mandatory in Pennsylvania for judges. So at 70, you are considered retired, but you're allowed to remain another 5 years as a senior judge. And I was a senior judge for that 5-year period. In the meantime, I had gotten used to coming down to, my wife had died 5 years before I retired. And I met a woman and remarried and remained in Florida, where I used to vacation during the summertime, during the wintertime.
Can we get to talking about St. Demetrius, the business of the church, the community, the early days when you started getting involved and so forth?
I started getting involved shortly after I started practicing law. I always wanted to know more about our history and basically our religion. And we didn't have a church where I grew up in Vineland, New Jersey. The closest church was in Atlantic City. And then later, another church was founded in Camden, New Jersey, which church is now in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. So we used to go to Atlantic City, but that was so far away for us that the only time we could go was during Easter and Christmas and the big holidays, you know. So I went to an Episcopalian church, and I don't know that they could do it now, but the priest was very friendly to our family, and he knew that we couldn't go to Atlantic City to the Orthodox church, which we were. So he got some communion from the priest. I don't know that they would permit that now, but and gave us communion for Easter at the Episcopalian church in Vineland. Following that, I wrote to the Archdiocese and got, maybe 25 or 35 pamphlets about different aspects of Greek Orthodoxy and different. I was always interested in the history, religious history. And so after I started practicing law, I just gravitated to our church. I was married in the original St. Demetrius Church, if you remember,
Sure.
in West Philadelphia. I'm trying to remember where. Well, I think it was on Larchwood Street.
59th and Larchwood.
Okay, and I wasn't active there, but when the Upper Darby Church was built, my father-in-law was one of the co-founders of that. That's when I started getting active in the church, and I started teaching Sunday school there for a couple of years, 2-3 years, and then. Some of the people that were on the parish council took notice and wanted me to transition to the parish council, which I did. And then the rest is history. I represented them in all their legal things. Was involved in the financing and construction of the I call it the community center, but it housed the Greek school and the Sunday school.
Oh, the wing that was built.
The wing on to the right.
1985, I believe it was around. It was
Right.
finished.
And I was active there really until I went on the bench. I served on the parish council. I served at different positions, including the presidency a couple of years. And Manny Leventelis was, who unfortunately just passed not too long ago. Had been president. I think he was maybe the longest serving president. He was president 3 or 4 or 5 times. I was president 3 times. It was a satisfying feeling to be able to contribute the way we did at that time, you know.
So your devotion to Hellenism, specifically serving as president of the Federation of Hellenic American Societies of Philadelphia and Greater Delaware Valley. How did you become involved with the Federation?
Thinking back, my father-in-law was very active. He was one of my role models too. And it probably was through him that I got involved in the Federation. And I'm a little hazy about exactly where the beginning was. I may have started as a representative for
a delegate,
either the church or, you know, my father was also very active in the Pontian Society. Was quite active in Upper Darby. It was a large Pontian community in Upper Darby, and they had a property across from Milburn on Market Street, not too far from 63rd Street. So that's how I got involved with the Federation. And I remember when I was active, when I was president, I tried to get the membership of the Federation was largely organizations representing what we call Topaka Somatia, which were the Pontians, the Cretans, all the various, wherever you're from, they all had their own associations. And some of them had substantial treasuries. And I tried to get them to consolidate at least a portion of their treasury so that we could buy a home and have a place that we could call the Federation of American Hellenic Societies, which was our name. But we didn't have a base. And but I could never get any of these organizations to part with their money, although many of them gave scholarships to deserving young students, and maybe they wanted to keep the money for that purpose. But anyway, we never wound up building a community center, which is what we wanted to do. And we tried to do the same thing with a HEPA later on. Didn't work.
Wow, well, that's still always, that's a dream of the Federation today, still to have its own building. Sure, they talk about it. I'm involved as treasurer right now of the Federation, and we were very fortunate the past few years to have some substantial donors for the parade and for our endeavors. And bringing up the parade, was the parade an annual event when you were president or when you were involved?
It was pretty much an annual event, and I remember when I was active and politically in Upper Darby, one of my jobs was to prepare the annual resolution for Greek Independence Day, and then we would go to church in the morning on that day. I remember Jimmy Ward would accompany me, and we'd sit in church, and then following that, the parade occurred, and that was pretty much an annual event for many years. I suppose it still is.
It still is, yes, yeah. Still is. In closing, your journey spanning many years, is there a story or two, maybe a memory or message you would like to share with the community?
Well, the message, of course, is unity, which as the community grows and spreads, changes. The younger people, a lot of these organizations, what I call the Topika Somatia, depending on where you're from, the village you're from, and so forth, are getting smaller and smaller. Some are disappearing, and they are the backbone of the Federation. I think long term, I'm not seeing a rosy future for those organizations, because I think eventually they're going to disappear, and some have already disappeared. Like, for example, the Pontian Society had the house I told you about on Market Street across from.
It's still active.
Is it still active? Okay. I don't know what their membership now is, but I think those somewhat eventually are going to disappear. It's going to become difficult to maintain a federation without some real lions leading it and keeping the people together, which I think is going to be a problem in the future. I think it's important to preserve as much of this history as can be preserved. And I think what the Greek American Heritage Society is doing, and Cosmos Philly especially are doing, are important contributions to the history of the Greek American community in this area.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for doing this interview.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you for being with us.
For more information about sponsoring or viewing the interview series, visit the Greek American Heritage Society of Philadelphia online at gahsp.org.